The Protocols of Carstairs. Chapter 1. Looking Back in Anger. Wednesday, September 9th, 2015. Risky, approach, wacky. English, visit for you. I had to be poked before I responded to the announcement from the guard, as I was contemplating my future at the time. English, where? The guard was pointed in my direction and came up to the cell. You want visit? It is... He checked a form. Ashbaston, from British Embassy.
A visit from Mr. Ashbaston. That was all I needed. MI6 to the rescue, except not really. They had been very clear about that. If I got myself in trouble, I was on my own. Ashbaston was the local intelligence coordinator at the British Embassy in Riyadh. We hadn't met in person, but we'd spoken over the phone once or twice. He usually made me deal with his underling, until I started bringing in detailed information about active terror cells. Now he was acting on behalf of the embassy, which would send someone out to speak with British citizens detained abroad. Not to help in any way, mind you, but just to show the flag so that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs could plausibly say that the matter has our attention, and we have been in contact with Mr. King, but we cannot interfere in the legal proceedings of a foreign government. I expected this conversation to be brief, yet depressing. I was led into an interview room, which was somewhat nicer than my communal cell, if not by much. The floor was just bare, sealed concrete, and there was a side table that contained some paper cups and a bottle of water. A man sat with his back to me as I came in. Floppy grey hair, bad posture. He had a black attaché case with him, which he accidentally kicked over as he turned round. "Oops, Mr. Carstairs," he said, reaching for my hand. Dad? That was my father! Alfred van de Kastelen, a man who, even though I came from his loins, can most charitably be described as an absent-minded dingbat. I love him, but he's completely and utterly useless. Daft as a brush, deaf as a post. Hobbies, obsessive sports watching and casual racism. Functional alcoholic, incorrigible prankster. The father my wife Melody never had. In fact, the father I barely had myself when he was younger. He'd been making up for that in his old age, though. Him and Melody were thick as thieves. He can be very charming, apparently. Dad grabbed my hand. "Ralph Ashbaston, British Embassy. Thank you, officer. We'll manage from here." The door closed behind me. I wasn't sure if this room was bugged, but I hadn't recovered from the shock, and so I said, "What the hell are you doing here, you deaf old coot?" Now, said Dad, turning his head sideways to show me a skin-coloured hearing aid behind his ear. "You got one? Finally? I mean, Jesus, that's only 3 decades overdue?" Yeah, just sit down. Can't be sure if this place is safe to talk." He gestured at the seat opposite him. This room had no large mirrors, and the only thing on the ceiling was a double fluorescent tube lamp. There was a window, but it was placed so high up the wall you couldn't see out of it, and so narrow my head would barely fit through, never mind the rest of me. "It probably isn't," I said as I cracked open the water bottle and poured 2 cups. The seal was intact. "So I've got this," Dad whispered. He picked up the attaché case and opened it. Then he fiddled with something inside, and both his voice and mine were heard. I was dumbstruck. After a few seconds I recognized my own voice reciting the English Caravaggio tour in the British Museum. Dad's voice was reading from Moby Dick. It was bizarre. He leaned in. "If we don't shout, they'll have a hard time listening in. Clever, that." Caravaggio's innovations inspired Baroque painting, but the Baroque incorporated the drama of his chiaroscuro without the psychological realism. As styles evolved and fashions changed, Caravaggio fell out of favor. "Whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet,
and especially whenever my hypos get such an upper hand of me that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off, I account it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. "Dad," I hissed, "why are you here?" "Well, your mother wanted to come, but that seemed a bit impractical, given where we are. Same for Miss Keller, really. Peter Fox is on some sort of list, fingerprints and all. Sending Kate or Kelly seemed a bad idea, and—" "Yes, you daft maniac, I get all that, but why you? I'm sorry, but I mean this in a loving way. You're useless, at this at any rate." Dad didn't seem offended. He never does. "Well, I'm all you've got. We wanted a first-hand account, and the embassy won't be doing anything for you, so Caroline arranged for me to go in as Adjbeston. I got it on a private plane, would you believe it? Your mother insisted on coming along too." "Mum is here?" "In our hotel room. Wild horses, you know. Even though she was told she couldn't see you. Well, maybe in that square if we stay long enough." "Oh, cheers, Dad." "First time ever. Food wasn't very good. When you think private jet, you don't really expect microwaved lasagna, do you? I mean—" "Stop talking about the fucking airplane. Please, this is serious. I am in deep shit." Dad's default facial expression, mild bewilderment, changed into something not unlike sadness. "Are you? Because we have no idea." "Of what? The charges, you mean?" "Neither have I, but it's going to be epic. If they convert it to community service, I'll be picking up trash long after the sun has extinguished. But they won't. Orphaned, Caravaggio took to the streets and fell in with a group of painters and swordsmen who lived by the motto nec spe nec metu, without hope, without fear. Bloody hell, this is annoying." I pointed at the suitcase, which was droning on. Dad shrugged. "But these are all landsmen, of weekdays pent up in lathe and plaster, tied to counters, nailed to benches, clinched to desks. It's a 1-hour loop. I've got all the time in the world. But look, here come more crowds pacing straight for the water and seemingly bound for a dive. Strange. How about you start from the top and tell me everything? And I do mean everything, so we'll know what to expect." I turned down the suitcase volume a little because this was driving me up the wall. "Dad, you've known me my entire life. Last time we met you asked me how I take my coffee. You must have asked me that well over 1,000 times. You also offered me wine, as you do with every meal. I don't drink wine. Never have." "Well, that's good, because I didn't bring any. I hope there's some at the hotel, though. We're at the tall one. Looks like a lady shave. Is that any good?" "So why would I bother telling you everything that happened only for you to forget 90% of it and warp the rest into something incomprehensible that will only confuse and upset the girls?" His face lit up. "Ah, I brought a thingy." He opened a small compartment of the case and took out a black button. Can't quite describe it, but think of a large shirt button without any holes in it. It did have a blue light on it, which blinked in a steady pattern. On the back was a piece of double-sided medical tape. "Stick that there," said Dad, pointing at his own trachea. "This thing also records. With that on, it can filter out your voice. They said they can manage anyway because they know what the recording is saying, but this makes it easier. Also, please stop insulting me and insinuating I'm demented. When it's about you or Kate, there's nothing I can't or won't do. I'll remember every bloody word. So start talking." I stuck on the button and trusted that the recording was actually in progress. Dad never had a problem with computers and electronics devices, and seemed confident that things were fine. "Okay, well, where to start? A couple of days ago Dad turned up the volume a little. We stuck our heads close together. "Start with the attack in London." I told you about that, remember? I had, over the course of a few long walks we had taken together in the days after the attack. It was the first time in my adult life that my father stepped up to care for me. He sensed I needed to talk, and he volunteered to listen. I'm not sure if he had anticipated it would take close to a week for me to say all I had to say, but never once did he complain. He just kept asking questions and inviting me to talk some more. I really needed that. I do remember, very well, but the others will want to hear it too. from your perspective. So please, start there. Caroline says you can tell us anything and she'll make sure the UK authorities will never hear of it." "That's not going to matter very much, considering what's in store for me," I sighed. "Oh, come on, surely it can't be that bad." "Want a bet?" "Let me get some more water first." So, as you know, I was on the Underground with Melody, Edwin, Kate, and of course Diana. I had my first read-through of a play Diana had asked me to perform with her. Kate had come to watch because she's Kate, and when I'm doing showbiz-type things, she wants to be involved. Melody had come along because I'd had an affair with Diana, and she was mildly worried we'd be tempted into misbehaving, and we couldn't get a sitter at short notice, so Edwin came along. He was good as gold. After the read-through, we decided to go out for dinner. Diana's husband, Nigel, was there too, but he wanted to smoke, and so he decided to walk to the restaurant. The rest of us weren't up for a long walk, so we took the Underground. I'd have taken my car, but Ali was stuck in traffic. As it turns out, the terrorists had caused this traffic jam somehow, to maximize the number of victims and stop the police from responding quickly. "Don't get ahead of yourself," said Dad. Okay, so when we arrived at Paddington, Mel and I had to reassemble Edwin's stroller on the platform. Diana had to go pee, so she went ahead. Turns out she didn't get far, but for a while I had no idea where she went. A bomb went off near the ticket office, and then two guys on the platform, one with a gun and one with a scimitar, a sword, started attacking people. There weren't too many passengers, as there had just been a train, but the guy with the scimitar hacked two people to death. I saw that happening. And the guy with the gun, who was on a different platform, also killed a few people. I sipped some water. I'd revisited this hellish tale so often, I had become slightly numb to it, which is good, I suppose. You don't need to go into detail. How did it end? It ended with me pushing the guy with a gun in front of a speeding train and feeding the one with the sword into the open machinery of an escalator that was under repair. That's where Kate had hidden Melody and Edwin, but he had found them. If not for Diana, who came out of nowhere, he'd have struck both of them with his sword. But he killed Diana. She died with her head in my lap, on the platform. And then Peter Fox showed up and took us away. Except Diana. She was dead. She was a wonderful woman, Martin. We'll never forget her. I know. I won't. So, a couple of days later, I got a visit from Sir Rupert Dupree of the Home Office and some MI6 guy, Simon something. They had a request. I'd met a Saudi prince when I was in Qatar to audition as Aston Martin spokesperson. We had a competition, and somehow I lost and still got the gig. Prince Asim. Now, Asim thought I was Caroline's butler, or rather that I was her business advisor posing as a butler. Why did he think that? Well, Caroline and I were having a bet. She said I couldn't be Carstairs for any length of time without breaking character. I said I could. He sort of stumbled into the middle of that, and we never saw the need to tell him what was going on. Anyway, he liked what he saw, or thought he saw, and extended a job offer to me, which Caroline declined on my behalf. And then Sir Rupert asked me to accept it anyway, because Prince Asim is the cousin of Prince Omar. And who is Omar? A person of interest when it comes to financing terrorism, and this attack in particular. Now, Asim is basically a nobody, 16th in line to the throne, so he gets a sizable allowance, but he's in the doghouse for messing up some business deals. But he and Omar are really close, like brothers. Asim idolizes Omar, and Omar relies on Asim when it comes to social interactions. You see, Omar is a bit of a heel, short-tempered, no time for idiots, dull as dishwater, totally devoted to his family. Smarter than most anyone he meets, and he knows it. Not a people person, in other words. He keeps Asim around to grease the wheel, so to speak.